I used to wake up at 2 in the morning and reach across the bed just to make sure she was still there. Most nights my hand found nothing but cold sheets. I'd hear the front door click shut a few seconds later, soft enough that she probably thought I could never notice. When I asked where she kept disappearing to, she'd smile like I was asking the most harmless question in the world. "I just need silence," she'd say. "The apartment feels too loud at night." The strange thing was that our apartment wasn't loud. It sat on a quiet street where even the traffic seemed to whisper after midnight. No television, no music, just us, or so I thought. I loved her enough to accept explanations that made no sense. We'd been engaged for almost a year, planning a small autumn wedding. My mother adored her. My younger sister called her the sister she never had. My friends kept telling me I'd somehow won the relationship lottery. Looking back now, I realize my life didn't fall apart all at once. It dissolved one quiet night at a time. While I convinced myself love meant never asking too many questions, the first few months after we got engaged felt almost perfect, which is probably why I ignored everything that should have worried me. She never liked talking about her evenings before we met. Whenever the conversation drifted toward old friends or familiar places, she'd gently steer it somewhere else. I told myself everyone deserved parts of their past they didn't want to revisit. Her nightly walks became routine. Around 11:30, she'd kiss my forehead, slip into a hoodie, and quietly leave. Sometimes she came back in 20 minutes. Sometimes it was nearly dawn. If silence helps you sleep, I joked once, why not stay home where it's already quiet? She laughed, but there was something forced about it. It's not the same. I wanted to ask what that meant, but I didn't. Trust is a strange thing. It can make obvious questions feel almost offensive. Instead, I started making excuses for her before anyone else even noticed. When my sister asked why my fiancé looked exhausted every weekend, I blamed wedding planning. When my mother wondered why she never answered late-night calls, I said she turned her phone off to clear her head. I believed every lie because admitting doubt felt more frightening than believing impossible explanations. The first crack appeared because of something so small that I almost laughed it off. One Friday night, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. It buzzed once, then again. I had no intention of looking. We had always respected each other's privacy. Then the screen lit up. Same place tonight? There was no name, just a number. Before I could stop myself, another message appeared. I miss hearing your voice. My stomach tightened. It could have been anyone. A friend, a relative, someone needing help. I repeated those possibilities until they almost sounded believable. When she came out of the bathroom, I mentioned the messages as casually as I could. She barely glanced at the phone. "Oh, that's nothing." "Nothing who?" "A woman from my meditation group." The answer came too quickly. I nodded, pretending to accept it, but something inside me shifted. For the first time, I realized I was working harder to protect her story than she was. That night she left for another walk, and instead of falling asleep, I sat in the dark staring at the front door, wondering why silence suddenly needed a secret audience. The doubt refused to leave after that. I didn't become one of those people who checked every notification or searched through pockets, but I started noticing things I'd ignored before. She always carried her phone face down. She changed the passcode she'd shared with me months earlier. If I walked into a room while she was texting, the conversation ended almost instantly. None of those things proved anything. Together, though, they created a feeling I couldn't shake. One evening I asked if I could join her on one of her late-night walks. She froze for just a second. "I'd rather go alone." "Why?" "Because that's the whole point." Her voice wasn't angry. It was almost pleading. "I need that time to think." I apologized for asking, but the answer stayed with me. We were about to promise each other forever. Yet there was one part of her life I wasn't allowed to see. The following Tuesday, she kissed me goodbye just before midnight like always. This time, instead of watching from the window, I grabbed my jacket, waited 30 seconds, and quietly followed her into the darkness. I kept telling myself I was only looking for peace of mind. Deep down, I was terrified of actually finding it. She didn't wander aimlessly the way I'd always imagined. She walked with purpose. Keeping my distance, I watched her cross 3 streets, cut through a small park, and stop outside an old apartment building I'd never noticed before. She looked over her shoulder once, then disappeared inside without hesitation. I stood across the street, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. She wasn't sitting on a bench enjoying the silence. She was with someone. I almost walked away. Part of me wanted to believe there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe an elderly neighbor needed help. Maybe she volunteered without telling anyone. My mind invented excuse after excuse because the alternative felt impossible. Almost an hour later, the front door opened. She stepped outside. A man followed her. He wasn't much older than me. He smiled at her with an ease that comes from familiarity, not friendship. Before they separated, he reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into his hand for just a moment. That tiny gesture shattered every explanation I'd been desperately holding onto. I don't remember deciding to confront her. One second I was hiding behind a parked car, and the next I was walking straight toward them. She saw me first. The color drained from her face so quickly that I knew, before anyone spoke, that whatever I feared was real. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. I looked at the man. "Who is he?" Neither of them answered. The silence she claimed to love suddenly felt unbearable. "I asked you a question." He took a cautious step back. "Maybe I should go." "No," I snapped. "You don't get to disappear now." She grabbed my arm, her fingers shaking. "Please, not here." I pulled away. "Then where?" "At our apartment, while we're mailing wedding invitations." Tears filled her eyes. "It isn't what you think." I actually laughed. "Really?" "Because it looks exactly like what I think." The man finally spoke. "I didn't know you were still together." Those 8 words hit harder than a punch. I turned toward her, waiting for her to deny them. She couldn't. She covered her face and started crying. In that moment, surrounded by strangers on a quiet sidewalk, I realized I had been the only person who didn't know my own relationship had already ended. The walk back to our apartment felt endless. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. She cried quietly beside me while I stared straight ahead, afraid that if I looked at her, I'd either scream or break down myself. As soon as we got inside, I turned on every light. "No more hiding," I said. "Tell me everything." She sank onto the couch, still shaking. "It started before we got engaged." I felt the room spin. "How long?" She whispered a number. "Almost 2 years." 2 years. For nearly our entire relationship. She'd been leaving me at night to see someone else while coming home to sleep beside me. "I was going to end it," she said through tears. "I just couldn't." "Couldn't leave him?" She closed her eyes. "Couldn't leave either of you." Those words hurt more than finding her with him. I wasn't competing with a mistake or a single bad decision. I was sharing my future with another man who hadn't even known I still existed. Every memory from the last 2 years suddenly looked different. Every vacation, every holiday, every promise felt contaminated. I couldn't tell which parts of our life had been real and which had only belonged to me. I wanted to hate her. Instead, I kept asking questions I wasn't sure I actually wanted answered. "Did you love him?" She didn't answer immediately. "I still do." The words landed with terrifying calm. No shouting. No dramatic confession. Just for quiet words that erased the future we'd been building together. "Then, why did you say yes when I proposed?" She buried her face in her hands. "Because I love you too." I stared at her, unable to understand how those 2 things could exist at the same time. "You don't get to love 2 people while lying to both of them." "I never meant to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "You planned a wedding. I thought choosing you would make the feelings disappear." Instead, every night she left our apartment, hoping to postpone a decision she should have made long before I bought a ring. Then she told me something I hadn't expected. "He doesn't know we're engaged." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "What?" "I told him we broke up months ago." Suddenly, I wasn't the only one living inside a lie. She had been telling 2 completely different stories, carefully protecting each from ever touching the other, until they finally collided in the middle of the street. I barely slept that night. She stayed on the couch while I sat in the bedroom, staring at the engagement ring resting on my nightstand. It suddenly looked like it belonged to someone else's life. Just after sunrise, her phone started ringing. She looked at the screen and froze. "It's him," she whispered. "Answer it." "I can't." "You owe him the truth as much as you owe me." She hesitated before putting the call on speaker. "Hey," the man said. "You disappeared last night. Is everything okay?" She took a shaky breath. "No, nothing is okay." There was a long silence. "I lied to you," she finally said. "I never ended my relationship." Another silence, heavier than the first. "What are you talking about?" "My fiancé knows everything." I heard him exhale sharply. "Fiancé?" His voice cracked on that single word. "You told me you were single." "I know. I spent almost 2 years believing we had a future." I closed my eyes. The pain in his voice sounded painfully familiar. For the first time time since all this began, I realized betrayal had reached far beyond our apartment. She hadn't destroyed one relationship. She had built two lives on the same foundation of lies, and now both were collapsing together. The days that followed were somehow worse than the night everything came out. Neither of us knew how to exist in the same apartment anymore. We moved around each other like strangers renting the same space, speaking only when absolutely necessary. Then our families got involved. My mother called to ask about the wedding invitations we'd promised to send at I couldn't lie. "It's off," I said. There was a long pause before she quietly asked, "What happened?" I told her enough to understand, but not enough to humiliate my fiancé. Within hours, both families knew the wedding wasn't happening. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some people assumed I'd cheated. Others believed we'd simply fallen out of love. Only a handful knew the truth. Her parents came over that evening. Her mother cried almost as much as she did. Her father looked at me and said, "Please don't throw away yours together because of one mistake." I couldn't believe what I'd heard. "One mistake?" I asked. "She lied to both of us for 2 years. He lowered his eyes but didn't argue. For the first time, I understood how desperately people rewrite reality when the truth becomes too painful to face. A week later, she asked if we could go for one last drive. I almost refused. Part of me thought there was nothing left to say, but another part still wanted answers that probably didn't exist. So I agreed. We ended up parked beside the lake where I'd proposed. Neither of us got out of the car. She kept staring through the windshield. "I've been trying to understand why I did this," she said quietly. "I wish I had a reason that made sense. You had hundreds of chances to stop. I know. You could have told me before the proposal. I know. You could have told him." Another whisper. "I know." Every apology sounded sincere, yet none of them changed what had happened. Then she admitted something that stayed with me. "I kept waiting for life to choose for me." I frowned. "What does that even mean?" "I thought eventually one of you would leave or something would happen that forced me to decide. I was too afraid to hurt either of you." Instead, she hurt everyone, including herself. That was the tragedy of it. Her fear of making one painful choice had slowly created something far more devastating than the truth ever would have been. She moved out the following weekend. I offered to leave instead, but the lease was in my name and she insisted it should be her. We packed her things in near silence. It was surreal watching someone dismantle a life we'd built together. The coffee mugs we picked out on vacation, the blanket we fought over every winter, the framed photo from the day we got engaged. She reached for it, then stopped. "I don't think I should take this." I nodded. Neither of us deserved to pretend that memory still belonged on a wall. Before closing the last box, she placed the engagement ring on the kitchen table. I kept meaning to give it back. I looked at it for a long moment. "I don't want it. It was expensive. It stopped being valuable the night I followed you." She started crying again. For the first time, I didn't try to comfort her. When the door finally closed behind her, the apartment became painfully quiet. She had always claimed she needed silence. Now I had all the silence in the world. It turned out silence isn't peaceful when it's filled with conversations you'll never get to finish. For months afterward, I kept expecting to see her. Every time I heard footsteps outside my apartment late at night, my heart jumped before my brain reminded me she no longer lived there. Sleep became difficult. I'd replay the relationship over and over, searching for the exact moment I should have realized something was wrong. I blamed myself for trusting too easily, for ignoring obvious signs, for believing love could explain away every inconsistency. My therapist eventually asked me a question that completely stopped me. "If your best friend told you this story, would you blame him?" I answered immediately, "Of course not." "Then why are you blaming yourself?" I didn't have an answer. Healing wasn't about forgetting her. It was about accepting that someone else's choices didn't define my worth. That lesson sounded simple during therapy sessions. It felt almost impossible at 3 in the morning. Sometimes I still wondered whether she ever truly loved me. Then I realized the question no longer mattered. Whatever she felt had been buried beneath years of deception. Love without honesty had left me with memories I couldn't fully trust. And that uncertainty hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. Almost a year passed before I heard anything about her again. It wasn't from her. A mutual friend called to check on me, and before hanging up, he hesitated. "I thought you should know she's not with him anymore." I didn't know how to respond. What happened? He couldn't get past the lies. The irony hit me so hard that I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was tragic. The same deception that destroyed our engagement eventually destroyed the relationship. She'd risked everything to protect. For a while, I wondered if I should reach out, not to get back together, but to see if she was okay. Old habits are difficult to kill, especially when you've spent years caring about someone. I even typed a message. Then I deleted it. Some doors shouldn't be reopened just because the pain has become familiar. I realized I wasn't responsible for helping her survive the consequences of choices that had nearly broken me. That wasn't cruelty. It was the first healthy boundary I'd set in a very long time. Walking away had once felt like losing the love of my life. Now it felt like finally choosing my own life instead. It's been several years now, and I still catch myself thinking about those midnight walks. Not because I miss her, because I miss the version of myself who believed every late-night kiss meant safety, every promise meant forever, and every unanswered question had an innocent explanation. I've dated since then. I've learned to trust again, although it looks different now. I ask uncomfortable questions instead of burying them. I pay attention when actions and words stop matching. Love still requires faith, but I've learned it also requires honesty from both people. Sometimes friends tell me I was lucky to find out before the wedding. They're right, but relief and grief can exist together. I didn't lose a marriage. I lost the future I'd spent years imagining. If she ever reads this, I don't want revenge. I don't even want an apology anymore. I hope she eventually learned that avoiding painful choices only makes them more painful later. As for me, I finally understand that silence was never what she was searching for. She was trying to outrun the truth. The truth caught up with both of us. I'm just grateful it did before we said, "I do."